And holy, excuse my language, shit, we are live bringing you a total of 6 atheists from 3 different friggin' countries. We've got Cindy from Belgium, Cynthia from the US, Susan from the US, Kenneth from the US, and Jez from the UK. And we are here for Ask an Atheist Day. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. We're going to try and be as informative and fun as possible. I am super excited. This is my first time meeting Jez, my first time meeting Susan. Cynthia, Cindy, and Kenneth and I have done a few things together. But if you told me 1 month ago that I would get to put this many atheists on a show together, I wouldn't have believed it. So I am pumped. Let's kick this show off. We're going to go into it as quickly as possible. I am Ethan. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I've been an atheist for several years. Your friendly neighborhood atheist, but on to the more important people. So, Cindy Plaza, if you could, give us a brief introduction.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm from Belgium, but I'm French. I've been living in Belgium for 4 years now. I've been an atheist for very, very long time, I guess, since I was 9. And recently I've been, like Ethan said, doing things with him, working on some debates he had and trying to help people as much as I can. So I'm super excited to be here tonight. Well, to me it's tonight because it's midnight and a half here. So
I appreciate you staying up late for us, Cindy. Cynthia.
Hi, I am Cynthia, as you just said. And I am also from Chicago, Illinois. I am a social worker, and I've been an atheist for almost 2 years now. Yeah.
That's awesome. Next up, we have both half of Divine Disbelief.
Can we go in a second? She got a phone call.
Oh, sure. All right. Kenneth, go ahead. It's all you.
Yeah. Hey, so my name's Kenneth. I am also in the Chicago area. I've been an atheist for, just thinking about this, I can't believe 7.5 years.
Got me beat.
And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenneth. Jez?
I'm English, so the story's more boring than that, really. It was one of these kind of gentle trajectories from going to church as a kid because my friends went and it sounded like fun to go to Sunday school, and then just gradually that kind of gentle evolution through, I think there might be something, but I'm not sure what it is, deism, through to maybe pantheism, through to, do you know what, I'm not too sure. So really, I couldn't possibly put a finger on it, but maybe about 20 years now that I've been atheist.
I'm jealous. I wish I had that long of a head start.
I'm very old, you see.
All right, Divine Disbelief.
So hi, I am Susan. I'm gonna get a little closer so everybody can hear me just fine. I'm Susan. I'm originally from Texas, so I've been an atheist for about 11 or 12 years. My mother's an atheist also, so it sort of runs in the family.
That is awesome. I'm happy to hear that.
She has a better deconversion story than I do. Hers is really funny, so I'll tell it one day. We actually just recently moved to Portland, Oregon, so you can see the forest behind us.
It's our real green screen.
Yeah, it's real. It's not fake. I was the treasurer for the Texas Democratic Secular Caucus, which focuses on separation church and state issues. And I was briefly, for a little bit, an assistant state director for American Atheists as well.
Yep.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I used to be cool.
No,
Not cool anymore.
Still amazing. I am Nathaniel. I am proud to be Susan's partner. I was a Christian for most of my teenage and young adult life. I was a youth pastor in Miami for a while, and I am now I'm an atheist now. And like Susan, I was also an assistant state director in Texas for American Atheists. I was a Democratic candidate for Texas House District 93. Almost messed that one up. And focus now on, because I studied science in college, certain very specific aspects, but now focus very specifically on first century Palestine, the origins of the Christian church very specifically. So, and then do a lot of counter apologetics almost every day. So.
That's awesome. You know, I wonder why is it I feel like when you become an atheist, you automatically start going left leaning. And I don't understand that. Well, I mean, I guess I do, but I will say whenever I see never mind. I don't want to get political. Let's move on to the fun stuff. Okay. So, Cindy, I'd like you to take this first question. Everyone else feel free to interject as needed. How would you define atheism? And do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold?
So, first, I understand that there's a lot of backlash regarding this topic. I know when you debated some people, this was one of the major questions.
Yes.
I understand that many believers, because not only Christians, don't want to keep the burden of proof, so they transfer it to us by saying that we believe there is no God. But saying that it's like saying Christians believe that the earth is 6,000 years old. It doesn't apply to every Christian the same way that believing there is no God doesn't apply to atheism. Mm-hmm. And if you want to put a tag on a group of people, then the tag must at least have defined the common point all these people have. So atheism cannot be, the definition of atheism cannot be believe there is no God, because it's not shared among all the atheists. So what is to be an atheist? It's to lack belief there is a God. And that's, in this, there are two categories of people. The people who have been introduced to the concept of a God, and people who haven't. I understand that many Christians in the US, when they talk to an atheist around them, it's most of the time it was a Christian and then it became an atheist. But if you look at the world entirely, there are lots of countries who are basically atheists. And in these countries, like France, where I grew up, religion is pretty much inexistent. So if you're not exposed to the notion of a God, then you don't have a belief. Belief is like it's a feeling, you know. Right. You don't choose your belief. You don't choose your feelings. It's like love. You can have a wonderful person next to you and not being in love, and the other way around. You don't choose to be in love. Either you have those feelings or not. It's the same with a belief. Either by being convinced of something, you have a belief, or you don't have it.
Right.
And if you haven't been introduced to the notion of a God, then you also don't have any belief, because of course you don't have any belief over something you don't even know exists, right?
Right. All right. So real quick, Cindy hit on an important thing, and I want to ask you this, Jez. You're from the UK. Would you agree with that statement that your other countries aren't necessarily exposed to a belief in God as much? Or what is it like in the UK?
Oh, yeah, very much so. It simply does not form a part of the culture to the extent that we perceive that it does in the US. I've never been to the US, I wouldn't have a clue, but it seems from the media we get and from when we meet people online, it's very much a question of people identify as being Christian as part of who they are in the US.
Right.
Nobody would ever dream of saying that in the UK. Although, having said that, I do work with people who, I work in a school which is run by evangelical Christians. There are actually some wonderful people there, and for them, it does form a major part of their identity. But I would say, and I would say a thumbnail guess, maybe 2% of the population would ever say that. And even so, if I sit in the staff room, it doesn't get discussed. Nobody mentions it. It's just
Really?
the way of doing. Nobody just we have assemblies and that's that, and it's part of the school's mission. So we all just sit there and watch and enjoy it, because it can be whatever. But it's just not an issue. Nobody's interested in your religion in the UK, unless they're racist and you're Muslim, and we've got whole new problems there, of course.
Right.
But in terms of actually being a Christian, nobody cares.
It's funny because the UK has a state religion, and you have, I think it's 20 seats in the High House, which are reserved for clergy.
Yeah, that's the recent argument, is that they should be removed. Those members of the House of Lords, the bishops, should not have those automatic seats. But you're right. Yeah, people. I mean, England is probably one of the most secular democracies in the world, and yet we're not a secular democracy. We're actually, our head of state is the head of the church.
Wow.
So the Queen is the head of the Church of England. Ever since Henry VIII, the Queen is the head of the Church of England. So it's just that nobody cares. It's just no one goes, oh, we must go to church because the Queen is the head of the church. Nobody cares.
I loved hearing Eddie Izzard talk about like the establishment of the Church of England. Basically, just I want to get a divorce, and the Catholic Church was all like, no, and he's like, well, I will start my own religion then.
Can I chime in just real quick
Absolutely.
on that? So like my mom is Jamaican, and but she was a British citizen, and of course she was raised in the Anglican Church, and even like, you know, growing up, I was Episcopal for a very long time, and but when I came out as being atheist, it really wasn't that big of a deal, because like it's like church when I was with my mom was just kind of like something that we did, but it was not like something that was like super like like when you were talking previously about Christianity being as an identity for people that was in the United States. And I would definitely say, you know, further on when I was actually leaning more into Christianity, that was the case for me. But growing up, that was not, it was kind of like an afterthought, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So like, so by the time that, you know, I was like, yeah, I'm atheist, it's like, okay. Yeah.
All right. Next question.
Can I interject one thing?
Please do.
Piggybacking on, I thought Cindy's, idea of trying to create the most inclusive definition of atheism as possible is completely spot on. But just, I can't resist with the second part of the question. Do you believe that atheism is a justifiable position to hold?
Yes, thank you.
Strictly speaking, I wouldn't say that it's holding a position, and I know that theists think that this is a weaselly thing to say.
I was about to say, don't be a weasel. Don't be weak.
But it is analogous to if someone asks you what your favorite sexual position is, saying it's abstinence. You're not really in the game making a positive assertion here. So not accepting other people's positions that they hold. Strictly speaking, I don't think we're talking about holding a position as much as rejecting other positions.
Yeah. Also, and that will be my last point. Everyone on earth is an atheist regarding thousands of gods.
Yeah.
Even Christians are atheists because they lack belief in other gods.
Exactly.
We just do one step further.
One more.
Right.
That's the only difference between them and us.
Right.
And that's such an important point. I think people forget that we literally are all atheists. And I'm glad you brought that up. All right. Question for Divine Disbelief. Do you affirm or deny that atheism is a world view?
To me, and I feel like Nathaniel agrees with this,
Probably.
atheism itself is just the lack of belief in God, unless you're using the philosophical definition. We don't talk about the people who use the philosophical
Hi, Steve
definition of
McRae.
atheism.
Say Steve's name 3 times, he'll show up.
Yeah. Beetlejuice.
Tweeted about him earlier.
I think atheism influences a lot of worldviews, because you were saying earlier, people who our atheists tend to lean left, but there's so much involved in politics that is heavily ingrained in religion that when you distance yourself from religion, you are also sort of distancing yourself from a lot of those sort of worldviews. Right. So I think it's much like, it's much like you were saying earlier, Cynthia, it's not your entire identity, but it's, a lot of times it's an adjective, not an identity sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't see it as an entire worldview. I see it as having an effect on it, but not being the whole thing. Would you agree?
I think it's the definition of worldview, however a person might take that and use that. It doesn't define a person necessarily, because it's like a definition, prescriptive versus descriptive. I think one could say that because there's nothing in atheism. I know conservative atheists, and I know libertarian atheists, and I know liberal atheists, and then I know me. I'm further left than anybody that I know. I think Shay's further left than I am. Yeah. And and so none of that is actually predicated upon atheism, and nothing that I do is predicated upon atheism. And so I don't know necessarily, but depending on how a person would use a worldview. Usually that's a presuppositional argument to have in a conversation, because that's where the word worldview even really comes from. And if you'd like, I can make Frank Turek block me on Twitter again whenever we talk about that.
Again?
Yeah, he blocked me. I tore his little book apart and he blocked me.
It is a strange question, because it's akin to saying, do you think that not liking football is a worldview? Like, well, not really. It's just a thing that I do, but there's many other things that form my worldview.
Right.
Right. Humanism, secular humanism. It's just going around. How could not being convinced there's a deity be anything other than precisely that?
Yeah.
It's just a one-trick pony. That's all it is. It doesn't say anything else.
Right. It's got an awesome guy. Catalina, how do you know that?
Yeah. I was even going to say that, going back to what is really an atheist, right? Like, what is atheism? And it's basically a lack of belief of God.
Right.
That's what it is.
Colloquially it is. That's the definition we use. God, you're going to bring Steve McRae in here. Stop.
We will not mention others. We just, but I look at that differently as far as like a worldview is concerned. I mean, like, as you mentioned, Jez, like it's kind of to the point where, okay, my lack of belief in a God does not necessarily color my lens on how I view the world. There's a lot of different things that I would definitely say very much so influences the way that I look at the world, the way that I view the world, even how I interact with the world. But, but as far as like my lack of belief in a God or gods or however you want to put it is not necessarily one of them. So I would definitely think they would be two different things.
This is where I tend to really like the idea that atheism is essentially the conversational space where humanity is free to have better conversations about how to share this planet without all the baggage that competing religious claims bring to the table. And this is where, when people talk about, attributing various atrocities to atheism, saying, Stalin or Mao killed, millions of people in the name of atheism. Not really. That's a super disingenuous argument when it's made, because to what, was being said earlier by half of divine disbelief, there's this, this idea of things being done, in the name of something. That's generally, I can't think of anything that's done in the name of atheism any more than doing something in the name of not liking football.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. So before I get to the next question, there is one question I just want to quickly ask all of you. I personally went through an angry atheist phase. And I feel like, at least in America, that is kind of a norm, and I could be totally wrong. But for like the first 6 months, I was just on a war path. And unfortunately, Catalina, one of the people in the comments, was one of those people I was on a war path with. And I, unfortunately, was a total dick. And so, Catalina, if you're still watching, I'm sorry. But, dude, I don't know. I feel like it's a shitty rite of passage where you just go through this angry phase. Was that just me? Starting with divine disbelief. Did you have that ever?
My conversion was more sort of, I became an apatheist before I became an atheist. Like, I just sort of became apathetic about the idea of religion before I really started looking into a lot of stuff. I actually didn't start looking into anything that would have, normally led people out of religion. Like, I didn't read any Hitchens or Dawkins or Harris or Dennett or anything like that, not the Four Horsemen or whatever. I didn't read any of that until after I had already been an atheist for probably about 4 or 5 years. So I never really had a chance to go through the angry phase.
Okay.
My angry phase stuff is more about reproductive justice stuff.
Yeah.
So I can talk a lot about that.
All right. You and I should have a talk on that sometime. I would love to cover that.
Yes. I'm actually on a friend's channel after this talking about an interview I did about reproductive justice stuff.
And real quick, where can they see you at Divine Disbelief? If you could just, reference your channel, Facebook.
So we are Divine Disbelief on YouTube. Facebook.com/Divine Disbelief, Twitter, Divine Disbelief.
I run that one. I run that. Yes. So if you ever wonder who's tweeting, it's me.
It's him.
We guest shows like this all the time.
Yeah.
Like Serious Skeptic and stuff like that. So
have you had an angry atheist phase?
Nope. I never did. Usually usually it has to do with people who were, I think Casper put it in the comment, the chat very well, that it's usually by people who feel as though they were lied to their entire lives, or physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually abused. I never felt that, and so I never had that type of experience. Mine was more with myself. So.
Okay. Jez, would I assume you didn't have that because you essentially were?
Yeah, I'm English. We don't do the anger thing. We just.
I've seen your football teams.
Very much like Divine or Disbelief was saying. It was the question of, I certainly was not particularly apathetic, and then I became very interested in the arguments against it. I found them very exhilarating. So I really enjoyed reading Sam Harris, reading Dan Dennett, reading Hitchens, reading Dawkins, and of course not just Dawkins' books against religion. The other ones is The Greatest Show on Earth, The Selfish Gene. Absolutely stunning books. Incredible books. So I really enlarged what I knew about the world in learning about the world. It's far more interesting. As Dawkins always says, the knowledge of how things came about is so much more beautiful and interesting than just going, God did it.
That's true.
No, but let's just get into it, learn about it. It's the most incredible stuff. And it's just, as if someone wants to stop with God did it, that's fine. But it's a bit of a shame for me personally. I mean, I do know, and I work with plenty of scientists who will say God did it, but they also they've somehow built that into their own education. So they don't teach that. They will teach the hard science, which is what we do in our country. We teach the hard science, but they've still got faith, and that's fine by me. They do what they do. But for me, as I said, I really enjoyed learning the arguments against it, and of course recently channels like the Atheist Experience, and then of course Cosmic what's
Skeptic?
Skeptic, yeah. Oh yeah.
I love him. He's great, Cosmic. And recently I've watched a little bit of Eric as well on Murphy. Who's Eric
Murphy?
Yes, that's the one. He's got an interesting style. Interesting style. So I do enjoy listening to the arguments being trooped out week after week. That's great. But no, never angry. Just interested in facts.
I agree.
Information.
Cindy, did you ever have an angry atheist phase?
No, because like I said, I deconverted when I was 8 or 9, I guess. It's weird because my mother was a believer, but she never enforced her belief. She never baptized me or my brothers, but she put me in a Catholic school in where I grew up. And sometimes there were these religion classes. And one day I remember in the morning we had course on dinosaurs, and the afternoon it was Genesis, Adam and Eve. So, so I raised my hand and I said, "But you're telling us that this is the first thing on Earth, and you said this morning that there was dinosaur before." And she said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, that's it." So that's when I understood it was
Bullshit.
It was basically like Santa Claus. It's a boogeyman made to force you to behave. And for me, it was just the same kind of stories because I loved Greek mythology already at this age, and to me, I didn't see any difference.
Right.
So when I realized that, I said, "Well, that's the same," and just I forgot about it. And then when I was 30, I was working in NATO, and I met other people from plenty of nations, and that's where I realized that religion was in fact a problem in the world. And I didn't get angry, but very frustrated sometimes. Very, very frustrated.
All right. So real quick, actually, I just want to hit on something real quick because you brought up an interesting point. Now, I wish I had these critical thinking skills when I was younger, but I still remember the first time my mother tried to explain Jesus and God, and I was so confused. She's like, "Well, Jesus is the Son of God." I'm like, "Oh, okay, so Jesus is the Son. So then he's not God." "Well, no, Jesus is God." I'm like, "So wait, is Jesus God or is Jesus the Son of God?" "Well, he's both." And I was just sitting there like,
Yes.
this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, it was so confusing to me.
And then you have the Holy Ghost in there, and then it just messes everything up.
Yeah, what's up with that guy?
Right? He's just over the Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost.
The Holy Ghost is a convenient way of getting rid of females, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
Ethan, I'll chime in with the angry atheist thing because I very much did have that. And
I'm not alone.
yeah. So just to give a little bit of context, I grew up in an extremely fundamentalist community in the Christian homeschooling community in Southern California. The very first science classes that I ever had were led by a guy named Henry Morris and another guy
fuck that
named
dude.
and
We have met.
and another guy named Dwayne Gish. If anybody's
Gish
Dwayne
Gallop, dude.
Yeah, Dwayne Gish.
So these guys were the founders of the Institute for Creation Research in San Diego. So there was this sort of miseducation that I was subjected to. So this sense of being lied to was very, very much a part of my deconversion. And so yeah, there was about a 3-year period where I was fully, anti-theist, religion poisons everything.
Yep.
Like really, really, really militant and hardcore about it. I mellowed out, but yeah, no, it's very much a real thing, and I think that I think that might be sort of an American phenomena to a large extent because of our culture. But yeah, anyway.
Cynthia, you haven't had a chance to answer yet.
Yeah, I guess I can round this out. I went through more of a disappointed phase.
Okay.
And with sprinkled in with a little anger. And I think that the reason for myself is that even though I was very much exposed in Christianity per se, like growing up, but it wasn't really until I became an adult that I was I kind of went through the fundamentalist, stage. I got saved, whatever the fuck that means. Sorry, y'all. But anyway.
I just want to tell you I love you so much, Cynthia.
But and so I remember later on in my late 30s, I started kind of questioning my beliefs, and I started kind of looking outside of Christianity to kind of find the answers to truth per se. And I found myself actually studying Buddhism. Even though, like, I did that whole Catholic. I grew up in Catholic school, raised Episcopal. You know, exposed to a lot of different religions. Found Buddhism in my late 30s, and actually, yeah, and then and even practice. I actually still practice Buddhism, but I'm a secular Buddhist. Because I really like the philosophy. But the thing about it is that when and the funny thing about Buddhism, it actually led me to being an atheist. If
Really?
anybody believes that. Yes, it did. Because like I said, being a secular Buddhist or like Nietzschean Buddhist, like you don't worship gods. And another thing that is about it is that you don't look outside yourself to find the answers for yourself, if that makes sense. You know, it's really very much so about empowering the self and getting you together, right? And so, and I remember like the book that kind of like, you know, turned the light on and kind of got me disappointed and angry. I don't know if anybody is ever familiar with the book, The Four Agreements.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good book. But basically, one of the agreements is I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but you know, look it up, Google it. But anyway, one of the agreements that was in it was called "Be impeccable with your word."
Okay.
And in that particular chapter, he was actually defining what sin was. And, you know, like any person that grew up in Christianity was like, sin was basically violating God's law, right? But in the book, he said, no, that's not really it. Sin is when you do anything against yourself.
Okay.
And when I read that part, I threw the book across the room. Like, oh my goodness. Anyway, I was a picture for the Cubs at that particular time when I read that. But, you know, but when I actually, because that's when I realized that, you know what, I felt like that's the point that where I've been lied to all my life. It's like trying to keep these statutes of a deity that is questionable at best, being there, right? Always like this big brother sky daddy looking at you, you know, scrutinizing everything that you do. And then when you get to the point where it's saying like, oftentimes trying to serve you per se has been violating me. Right. And that was the point that really kind of made me very disappointed, because I felt more so that I was robbing myself of being myself. And then like I had to kind of like take that time and to like pick up the pieces and kind of like reconstruct like who is really Cynthia. And that's when I really had to start looking within. And then so like when I finally said, you know, I really do lack a belief. I really don't, you know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, I grew up with, I was studying all this other different things, because even I was studying to be a minister for once in my life. And I'm like, it's just, I don't have enough concrete evidence or anything to that to say that I can really hold on to these beliefs, even specifically for myself.
Right.
And then so that really got me to the point where, you know, I was like starting to let a lot of these things go. But when I actually started letting go of those particular beliefs and the things that I actually like, you know, held dear to for a good part of my life, I was less angry, you know, and more thinking of, I more start thinking of, it's like, well, what can I do to actually be more of a voice of reason to people
right.
who still hold to these particular beliefs, so that, you know, maybe I can help them start thinking, like, you know right. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like how I went. Yeah.
All right. We have to get on to, we have so many questions. So let's try and hit some of these up. I'll try and rotate these between everyone. Divine disbelief. What would it take for you to believe in God?
I don't know.
That's fair. That's fair.
So
I give the same answer. I don't know, but if God exists, He knows what it would take for me to believe in God.
Absolutely.
Thanks Matt Dillahunty, for that one.
Yeah. And
yeah, we're happy to be friends with him. Yeah, I have no idea. You know, no, don't know.
Yeah,
it can't be a personal experience, so I don't know.
Yeah, because you can't repeat it and repeatable, testable, verifiable, mixed predictions.
Right.
Falsifiable. Sorry.
to be clear, I'm not coming up with these questions. These are from Christians, so they are obviously loaded or poorly worded.
Of course.
So please don't think they're
Very
coming from me.
typical.
And
Very
I like the question that Theology put in the chat. So if
ahead,
there's an
address it.
opportunity, I think it kind of depends on which type of Christian you ask. If we talk to the Docetists, they're going to say something a little bit different, or the 1st and 2nd century Gnostics, they're going to say something different as well. Obviously, Saul of Tarsus was certainly not a Trinitarian. We know that because more than once he actually called Jesus an angel. But the Trinitarian view, of course, was obviously not Arius' view either, but John 1:1 to 1:4 very specifically. It has to do with all three of them being one, and then being there at the beginning with one another and being eternal with one another. But again, it's not biblical, and that's the reason that they had to come together in 325 to actually have that conversation. And by the way, Nicaea is only one ecumenical council. That's not why they put the Bible together. Stop saying that, atheists. So just so you know, that's when they decided that Jesus is God and also is one with God, the Godhead, and is also God the Father, even though he said he wasn't multiple times and whatever. I have many conversations. I've actually written stuff regarding Jesus not claiming to be God. So
yeah, he has.
He's
done it as a deep dive on our show.
Yeah, I had to debate too. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, going back to the stuff. Thank you for answering that, because that was gonna pick at my brain for a while. So thank you. The
Trinitarian one.
Yeah, the Trinitarian one.
Was,
what I like to always say is, I don't know what it would take, but even if I did have the evidence that would convince me that a God, specifically the God of the Bible, exists.
Right.
It doesn't mean I would become a Christian, because the God of the Bible is kind of a dick.
kind of.
No, baby. No. He is a dick.
Yeah. he's not good. He's not good. I wouldn't worship him.
Can you imagine if he was actually your parent and you were treated like that or judged like that? That's horrifying to me. I don't want that dude as my dad or mom.
Think of the therapy bills.
Oh,
exactly.
Therapy bills. That's all I got to say.
Here's one thing I would just like to point
It was
out.
demonstrably incorrect. Yeah, you're wrong. Guess what? In the beginning was the Word, was with God, and the Word was God. He's making with God, and all things through him. Nothing was made that was without. Nothing without him. Nothing was made that was made. Literally had this conversation. I knew your question was a leading, loaded question and didn't give two shits. I'm literally. That is what a fucking Trinitarian is. Okay. And if you'd like, we can have the actual debate in a fucking church about that.
He studies this on a regular basis. He reads the Bible more than most Christians.
Yeah,
That's good to know. So,
Josephus earlier.
if you could address this real quick, just because he did say all of that was demonstrably incorrect.
No, yeah, you can say that, but that's what a fucking Trinitarian is. You believe that all three in one, right? That the God, Father, Holy Spirit are the same fucking being. I'm bleeping myself on purpose. Apologies for cussing on your stream.
They are separate and the same. All the same.
But they're the
We
same.
already blew the F-bomb warning once, so
Yeah.
Sorry.
it's already happened. So at this point, it's on
I
this
don't know.
So
This is the reason this is the reason we decided not to go on that person's channel, because every single question is a loaded philosophical question.
One of the problems with that question is, as a Christian,
Right.
which one of the 1,000 different Christian sects are we talking about here?
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
those.
why I mentioned the
I
Docetists.
can walk
Just
10
with that
minutes to
alone.
go to my local vicarage and ask him, and I'll get a different answer.
Right.
Easy. So it's
Just
like
with that alone.
it's a question that's just going to go in circles forever. It's just pointless.
Yeah.
Really.
I remember I was debating a pastor, who had all types of degrees. He had more degrees on his body than more than a thermometer. And
It took me a second there.
more degrees behind your name than mama got on his body. But one of the things that we kept going back and forth on is that, this whole notion about all Christians are in, have this harmony on what they believe. And that's just not true. But the simple fact of the matter is, I think it's over just in the US alone, don't we deal with over 30,000 denominations and or
that
cults?
many?
Yeah.
So which one's right?
Yeah,
How do we know which one's right?
Exactly. I mean, like, I remember like back in the day when I was, again, Christian, say whatever. And I sat on a council of like, you know, different interfaith ministries that was on the campus. And yeah. And so one of the issues that like came up that kind of dissolved that whole panel was that you had different denominations on that particular panel that was fighting with the Catholics because they didn't believe that they were Christian.
Yeah, most evangelicals I know think that Catholics aren't Christians.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because the Orthodox, the right thinking, right, literally comes from Catholicism. So
Exactly.
how are you going to tell the people that they have the right thoughts that they don't have the right thoughts?
Right, exactly. So, you know, and so like that. So when you think about the Trinity as a Christian, loaded question, because you can go to one church and they say that, you know, the Trinity is bullshit. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to tell you that they believe in the Trinity, or they're going to, or then you're going to have others that's going to say, no, there's 3 in 1 God. So they're 3 separate persons, or that does not exist, or we don't even worship this one, or we don't even look at Jesus as God. We look at Jesus as the Son of God or a prophet or what have you. So, you know, there's way too many different interpretations of exactly what that would be for a Christian per se. So the real question to ask, sir, is can you define it as this particular denomination would? And then, you know, depending on if we know that, we can say what they would mean.
Yeah, I think, and we're talking too much. I'm sorry, but
No, you're fine.
And we have also stepped all over poor
sorry.
Kenneth and poor Cindy, and we are very, very sorry. We have done that. I'm so sorry.
Because the first Christians were not Trinitarians. Even Jesus himself wasn't a Trinitarian, which is why in every gospel except for John, he did everything through the power of God, not through himself. And even in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, 17 and 18 anyway, he's very specific in that he says that he believes that they're going to be the corgis in the background. Sorry.
Yes, they are.
That they're going to be on the planet for the kingdom of God, that it's going to be Israel. And so, and again, Saul didn't believe it either. So the Trinitarian view is non-biblical, very much non-biblical. So whatever you're going to say about it, you're not following the Bible, and that's in the original Greek. So however you would like to come at me with that, you're not following the Bible and Jesus himself. He never said he was God, ever. Even though the 4 times in the book of John, he said it. There were never things he said. So, you know,
watching everyone here talk, I used to be ashamed of being the least knowledgeable atheist in the room, but I wouldn't say I'm ashamed of that anymore. Like, I just literally could just sit here and listen to all of you talk because you just have so much information. All right, so I want to scrap the questions I had and actually just go to the questions in the comments. So, Cindy, let's go to you.
Just a second. I wanted to answer a comment made by Doulos. He said, where is it?
God under any obligation to meet your subjective standard of evidence?
Yes, they're not subjective. That's the thing. They are shared by everyone on Earth who uses the scientific method to understand anything. So it's not subjective.
And actually, that takes us back to the previous question, which is, what would it take for you to believe in God? Well, I'd have to lower my standards to yours.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right.
My standards are, as Cindy said.
I'm stealing that forever. I like that.
I have to lower my standards to yours.
I am going to remember that one.
Copied.
All right. I'm going to do my best to keep this conversation as balanced as possible. So, Kenneth, do you think the ontological argument works?
I would have to be refreshed on what the ontological argument is. Like, it's hard to keep track.
All right, divine disbelief. Do you know what the ontological argument is?
Yes, yes, and Dean knows it doesn't work, and he's been shown that with all the calls he's tried to make into also our debates where he's lost both times.
This is like it's got
into atheist experience and into talk heathen. Yeah, it's an a priori argument. It doesn't work. Its basic foundations are flawed. Even going back into like the 5th and 6th centuries has been yellow.
But that doesn't tell us exactly what it is, though.
Oh, sorry.
What exactly is it?
Is this
You're
like
saying why it's wrong.
Yeah,
there could be no
what
greater
is it?
possible or conceivable being, therefore,
Well,
if he exists, it's better than not existing, and therefore, am I? How bad am I mangling this?
No, you're not wrong, but it also depends. You have to get them to define which ontological argument they're speaking about as well.
Okay, so if you could define that in the comments, if you have any questions for the Atheist Roundtable, I really like that name. This could we could totally do a monthly thing, just as many atheists as possible.
But notice that every question they ask is philosophical because they know there's no damn evidence for their God.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Or sorry, let me be clear. I have yet to see evidence. I don't want to make the claim that there is no evidence. I personally just have yet to see it. Okay, next question. Not all atheists are antagonistic to Christianity, but for those who are, why the antagonism? So I don't want to direct it back to divine disbelief, but I feel like you'd be the most antagonistic one of the six of us. So I think you should.
Not.
I'm really
surprisingly enough, he's not.
I have a ton of Christian friends.
He does.
Trina is my friend, as close as one can get.
So he's also got a Periscope channel where he has people come in on a regular basis, and he has like a subject in there that's basically like, what's the validity of the Gospels and the resurrection, and did he ever say he was God or Son of God or whatever?
Right.
And he has really in-depth conversations with people. He only gets, I wouldn't say antagonistic. What would you do? Angry?
No, I don't think I've been angry a few times, but usually it's passionate, I guess.
Yeah.
Regarding certain questions, and like when people tell me that no, you're outright wrong about Christianity, and I was a Christian, or you're never really a Christian. You're demon possessed. Yada yada yada.
No true Christian, et cetera, et cetera.
Like no true Scotsman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I used to be.
Look at this. See this guy right here. No, I told we were very specific in that I discuss science and historicity. I don't discuss philosophy. All right. Susan wants, or theology. No, I don't care. You can debate your theology among your Christian friends. I don't debate or speak about philosophy because I am well versed in historicity and in scholarship. Okay, I just know what your shitty arguments are.
He deals a lot with apologetics and stuff. He deals with a lot of apologists.
I'm not antagonistic.
No, he's not.
Except for right now.
Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of context to answer that question. I think it was five years ago, there was a big poll in the US asking, what is the community you fear the most? And atheists came first before Muslims. And that was 10 years after 9/11. So I think part of the answer is here.
All right, next question. And so Trina is an atheist, and she's actually an atheist I'm going to debating because, so to be clear, I don't understand hard atheism. And what I mean by that is someone saying there is no God. Like, to me, that is, and I'm sorry, Trina, that's an irrational position to hold because you can't sit here and go to Christians and say, give me evidence for God, but then turn around and say, there's no God, but I don't have to supply you with evidence. And I'm sorry if any of you are hard atheists. I don't get it. It makes no sense.
I'm saying as Dawkins 6.9, you can't be a 7 because, as you say, once you say there is no, you've adopted the burden of proof, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you make things much easier for them.
Yep.
Yeah, of course you can. You become the same as they have. You become dogmatic. You've just got to say, I'm not convinced. I live my life on the principle that I'm not convinced, and that's that. I carry on with things the way they are. I've seen nothing at all to convince me of the existence of a deity. Full stop.
I would say, in Trina's defense, though, to the extent that people are willing to make specific claims about the attributes of their gods, that makes it a lot easier take sort of affirmative positions. If someone wants to debate the existence of Thor, I will take a hard atheist position against Thor. So if we're talking about a generic prime mover, first cause kind of God, okay, I'm with Dawkins at a 7, sure. But if we're gonna really get down to specifics, then I think that it's much easier to start saying, I don't think so.
Well, doesn't that necessarily mean that we are treating the old analogy of linking Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny and lumping them all together with God, like Cindy did earlier on? Are we then saying that we can't do that? Because we can say that Santa Claus doesn't exist, but we can't say that God doesn't exist. In which case, if we do take a hard atheistic view of one thing but not of the other, so we've got to ultimately say Thor might exist. Right? There might be a mountain somewhere. I'm same as you. I think it's I'm not seeing the Marvel Thor. It's just not happening for me. He's not out there. He's with big Mjolnir. But I get the argument. The minute you adopt that hard atheistic point of view of anything, including the Tooth Fairy, then you have separated the two groups.
Right. So let me address Trina's question. I'm curious what atheists believe happen after you die. I don't think there's much to expand on this other than just we die and that's it. I mean, if any of you think we can expand on this, feel free to. Otherwise, I don't really see anywhere for us to go on this one.
I just know I want to be put in one of those bio urns that turns me into a tree when I die.
Ooh, I want to be a tree.
Yes.
And then at that point, if a dog pees on me, it's perfectly fine. But until then, not so much.
Well, I live near the coast, so I'd like to be launched into the sea by a siege engine.
Or you can have a Viking funeral where you just
big
light a boat and set a blaze.
Unfortunately, in the UK, they're illegal, but still, it's fun.
I wrestled with that for a long time about what happens when you die.
Hard.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, well, one, because, coming from a Christian point of view, and then kind of like merging into like Buddhist philosophy, because a lot of Buddhists do believe in reincarnation or believing, like coming back and living many lives. And, even like if somebody asked me that as like a person that follows Buddhist philosophy, they said, do you believe in that? I said, nah, I don't deal with it. Right. I really don't deal with it, only because like, again, this taking like that whole thing about not taking the burden of proof on anything. I can't prove that you come back as anything. I can't prove to say that you would, your energy and all of a sudden chakras is going to do shit and all of a sudden you're going to be whatever, right? So to me, it's kind of like, it's like one of the things like I was even telling my cousin who asked me, do you have a problem with not with dying and saying there's nothing afterwards? And I said, no, I don't. I mean, because for the simple fact of the matter is that I don't remember anything before I was here. And more than likely after my life is over, it's going to be gone. The only thing that I can do is just kind of do what I can while I'm here and just leave it at that.
I feel exactly the same. I would argue that my life became more valuable the second I became an atheist. I love the people around me more now than I ever did before. I appreciate my life now more than ever before. There's so much more to life than just believing or hoping. All right, I hate to quote Matt Dillahunty again, but to me, many religions, they view life as the place to wipe your feet before you get to this other place. And you know what? No, like this life is valuable. It is all we have, and we need to appreciate it. And we should use that to, not to sound like a hippie, but to spread love and happiness. Like we shouldn't, I don't know, we should be fighting over trivial bullshit. I don't want to turn this into like too much off topic, but Doulos theology. I asked you, would you be willing to discuss the ontological state of affairs in which science is meaningful as a system of investigating reality? Is that not a discussion about science? If not, that just means that you're arbitrarily supposed in epistemology.
There are some necessary preconditions.
What are they? Yeah. That's aimed at me because I said we don't discuss philosophy.
We don't.
And by the way, as I mentioned, Kenneth, I was actually writing to you in the chat. I don't know if you can see it or not. I was telling you.
I keep that
Okay.
close because I'll just be like ADD.
Oh, okay. I was
distracted.
saying if Dean uses Anselm's ontological argument, which William Lane Craig does, so I know that Dean parrots him and thus he uses that. It talks about the maximally great being, which he just put into the chat, by the way, because apparently Facebook doesn't have a character limit. Yes, and it breaks. By the way, you can answer that, but I know it breaks down the first argument, whatever. And no, I wrote back to theology in the chat, and I said, I know that that's a loaded question, and I know that the philosophical question is loaded. You want to discuss science? We'll discuss science. You want to discuss the history of Christianity? We'll discuss that. Like, philosophy is not our area, and we don't discuss it on our show for a reason.
But to take Dean's first premise there, it is possible that a maximally great being exists. Prove it. Prove it's possible. I'm not even
My bad.
convinced.
You're not using William Lane Craig this time. You're not quoting William Lane Craig for once, or Michael Shona for once. It's not,
But he's that initial premise. It is possible. You have to prove that something is possible. If I have a dice, it's not possible if I roll that dice that it can come down 7. If it's a conventional 6-sided dice, it's not possible it can come down 7. So you need to prove that it's possible that maximally great being exists. Otherwise, we don't progress beyond premise 1.
Right.
Yeah.
And
fail.
this is the thing that gets to be sort of like super baffling at this stage in my development as a thinking person. Every single argument that I've come across, like in favor of theism, they've all been refuted soundly, publicly, repeatedly, and
that gets me too.
I don't understand. This is a point that I've been making with friends of mine who are in ministry regarding the use of fallacies, the use of bad arguments. It's like, why don't we just put those sort of in the bin and you guys can, do better. And it's very confusing to me that impulse isn't like leading the charge, that apologists aren't all going, yeah, guys, we need to scrap all this stuff that demonstrably doesn't work and figure out some new stuff. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so to speak, but like,
I agree. It's bothered me for years. They've brought nothing new to the table for 1,000 years.
Can I say something real quick? Just as a fairly new atheist, because like I said, I've only been like an atheist for like a couple of years. Right. I found it a little, and I don't want to make this statement seem arrogant, but even with people who are theists, who have studied theology, who are very much so in that particular life, they know the Bible, they know all the different whatever. I still found it a lot easier to take apart their arguments, especially when it comes to proof of God. Even like with Dean saying that possible, what I'm saying? My whole thing is this. If God is omniscient, omnipresent, and he's all the omnis, he's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. If he's all of that in a bag of chips, then I'm just saying, if this is who this particular deity, this being is, then it is possible for it, she, he, we, they, whatever pronoun it wants to use, to manifest itself, so that all of us will know, yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this particular deity exists.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
So,
well, no, I'm sorry, Dean. You got to stop capitalizing God. Because the furthest that Anselm's argument can get you is to a deity. It doesn't get you to Christianity. So stop it. Stop capitalizing God.
And Dean,
because then you have a whole other problem.
And Dean also seemed that for some reason what I said about his first premise is me saying that God can't exist. Not at all. But you've got to demonstrate the possibility. You can't simply take the possibility as read and move from there. You must demonstrate that it's possible.
Right.
Correct.
Hey, it could be right, but you've got to demonstrate that. You can't move beyond that point.
Right.
Funny comment from Larry DeLindy, Larry the Christian. So for the record, he's
Oh, that's my worst nightmare.
Really?
I mean, luckily I won't know. So that's
true. I got to give props to Larry again, though. So he was one of the first Christians to accept my insistence on debating. And one of the reasons this is possible today is because of him. And as a Christian, he is incredibly supportive of all the atheist stuff I do. He invited me to church, allowing me to wear my "This is what an atheist looks like" shirt. Real good guy. So anyways, moving on. Dean, I believe you already answered this question. Here, let's go to Cindy. I could be art. Oh wait, I guess that's not really a question.
Yeah, it's because he. By the way, God in general. So I followed this up. Then you should capitalize. You should lowercase the G. You're talking about a God, not specific God. Yeah. This is why. Yeah, use the lowercase G, Dean. Pretend like you're talking about literally any other God.
There's lots of them.
It's insulting to the other gods.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cindy.
Anyway.
Cindy, do you believe the world would be better off without religion?
It's what I said earlier when we were on backstage. I think it's a very, very difficult question to answer because it would depend by what you replace it with. Right. Because if you replace it by Donald Trump's everywhere, that would be a nightmare. If you replace it with, I don't know, other belief systems, even if they're not religious, I think it would be detrimental to humanity. I think the greatest challenge of humanity is our lack of critical thinking, because if you look at nuclear bombs, if you look at climate change, as humans, we can find solutions to these problems. But if we don't have any critical skills, then we cannot find any solutions to these problems. So that's why, I didn't say it during my presentation, but I'm trying to teach critical thinking here in Belgium. And I think it's a different view to me, because I think all beliefs are caused by the lack of critical thinking, not just religious belief, but political doctrines, conspiracies, alter medicine bullshit. All this is the same. To me, it's the same thing. It's a belief with no information or wrong information based on it. So to answer that question, I think I can't answer that question, because religion gives a sense of community to people. Right now, atheism doesn't. So if we remove religion, we'll have to provide a sense of community to people. So what will provide this? And the answer to that question will be the answer to the question asked.
I'd say we're building a community. I mean,
yes, it's changing. It's changing, yes.
I want to point out how cool this is. So one, I don't know any of you in person. We have only met and spoken through Facebook. Divine Disbelief, we just met
just YouTube.
Yeah, literally just through YouTube yesterday in the comments. It was like, hey, you want to join us? Like, so this is a community. We're building one. Like we got 6 atheists together from 3 different countries. Like that is a friggin' cool thing.
My inner Larry David is like, it's okay.
All right, Kenneth, I have a question for you. If you believe that the God of the Old Testament is morally bad, by what standard do you judge that he is bad?
Okay. Have fun, Kenneth.
I love the fact that both Kenneth and Nathaniel basically had the exact same reaction.
So we hear this shit every day. Jesus Christ.
So, like, language is such a funny thing, right? So, because when I talk about morality and when religious believers talk about morality, in my experience, we're not talking about the same thing. There's a huge distinction between morality being sort of contextualized as, whatever God wants and whatever's going to make God happy, and whatever's good for people. So if we're talking about morality and the question is God doing stuff that makes God happy? in the Old Testament, then it's like, kind of, he's not very effective at it, but he gets it right most of the time. Whereas if we're talking about like, are the things that God's doing good for, his creation? It sure doesn't seem like it. All the genocide, it doesn't seem particularly fruitful. Most of the, moral precepts in the law have nothing to do with human well-being. So, and that would be the standard that I would use to say that the God of the Old Testament is kind of a moral monster.
Go ahead, Steve.
Matt Dillon did a few debates in February, and one of them was debunked by Shannon Q, and she made, or her boyfriend said something I found very, very interesting, and that completes what you just said, Kenneth. We should, as atheists or secular humanists, we should stop using morality or moral and use ethics instead, because like you said, there's a lot of confusion. So he said that the difference between moral and ethics is like when you have your child coming to you and says, Dad or Mom, why can't I do that? And on one hand you say, because I said so, that's morality. Yeah. And the other answer is, because if you do that, this will happen to you, or you will hurt this person, or this will be the consequences. That's the ethics way of seeing things. Yeah. That's why I think we should stop using the word morality or moral and change the discussion.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way.
No,
so
I agree.
Actually, I had like a same issue like that with that too, Cindy. Like I prefer to use ethics versus morality only because, depending on what you believe or what type of philosophy you actually like hone your life to would determine sometimes what your morals are. And I mean, for the simple fact of the matter is that, I would even take like, slavery, right? Slavery was very much so cool with God in the Bible, and Jesus had no issue with against slavery, nor did Paul or any of the apostles, right? But if you ask the average person, gee, is slavery wrong? They would tell you, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, but at the same time, if you actually espouse to this particular belief system, right, saying like, I believe the God of the Bible and I use the Bible to actually judge my life, then you should be okay with with a lot of the problems that would be in it, which would be one of those, right? So I would definitely argue against, using morality too much, even though like, and I can understand how it can be used as an interchangeable when it comes to moral imperatives. But I believe that ethics, oftentimes is very much so copied throughout humanity, no matter what type of civilization culture that you belong to. You know what I'm saying? Like majority of people around the world, no matter what you believe in, believe that killing somebody is wrong, unless you are actually like defending yourself, right? But most of people believe murder is wrong, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like just like to give an example. So like oftentimes like we can kind of agree on, if there are certain statutes that you as a human being are going to garner to because this is something that we all agree that is wrong, or this is right, or this is how we're going to actually conduct certain things.
Right.
And that would be mostly ethics.
So I want to address this one real quick.
Why?
I think we all realize what's going on.
I'm going to make it in the chat. Come on.
Just read some Steven Pinker, Absolute Truth, and you'll feel so much better. He has a TED Talk. You don't even have to read it. You can just watch it on
You
YouTube
don't even have to read it.
for like 20 minutes. And you'll be like, oh, I'm wrong about stuff, and feel better.
I think he's just a troll.
You're probably right.
I wrote that in the chat as well.
Here's the problem. People, he says he's not he or she, they say they're not a troll. But
that's what a troll would say.
I see this argument all the time, and it's, hey, how does God, like my stepdad used this argument, and when he first found out I was an atheist, he literally word for word goes, yeah, he's Mexican. What is this no believing in God bullshit? So he's got a strong accent. And when I asked him for proof, he said, look around you. And people constantly make that argument. Looking around you is not a friggin' argument.
But
It's not an argument for
but
God. It's not an
so-
argument for anything.
It's so built into the prevailing mindset, though, because the argument you're likely to hear more often than anything else when you talk to Christians, especially in the United States, is personal experience, and not just Christians. So look around you and think about how you feel. There's this presumption that human beings are really good at accurately assessing what's going on around them. So, once you start to break down that assumption and start looking at like how individual human beings are not very smart typically and can be wrong about a lot of stuff like all the time. Yeah. Okay. I like him.
Extremist leftist satanic elite.
Okay.
Soy boy
If there was
avocado
a troll
bread.
award, if there was a troll award, he just got. He or she just got it.
The best troll.
I have a
someone-
trophy in the room I can get.
Oh
Yeah,
my
they got it.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
And also, I would like to point out that saying that it's been worse and worse is just plain wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you. I was going to go into that.
yeah.
It's one. I'm sorry. I think the world's getting better. Call me
It
crazy, but we are improving. We are no longer. We still are, but we're more aware of mental illness. We're more understanding of LGBTQIA plus rights. We're moving forward as a society. Now, granted, I see how they could say it's getting worse by a biblical standard, but I call bullshit. No, our world is
Can I
question.
Can I say something? I'm sorry. Can I say something about the other comment that they just made? Look around. Look around. You people suffer in your cities every day. Look how you do not help them while you sit comfortably.
I'm good.
I responded.
Okay.
Yes, social worker. What are you doing to help out?
It's my job to help people. What are you talking about? I mean, here's the thing, absolute truth, which I would argue with how absolute your truth is. First off, you do not need, again, any type of outside anything to actually influence you to do the right thing. You know what I'm saying? That is a humanistic value. Right. And also too, I know for a fact, I can speak for myself, that I had more compassion concerning my fellow man when I actually let go of the belief of God. Because it's right. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about it is that if you really want to be concerned about the suffering that's in cities, which is true, you know what I'm saying? We see this every day. Look at what's going on with the pandemic. Maybe you should be writing a congressman or two. You know what I'm saying? Right. Maybe you need to be engaging in some type of, civil action on your part in order to get, certain infrastructures together so that we can have less suffering. And I find it quite disingenuous, especially when I see a lot of theists talk about like all the suffering in the world. Look at all the suffering in the world, but they don't necessarily look at the systems that's in place that makes people suffer. And they definitely don't want to actually be a part of that in order to change those systems.
They don't have to.
No, they don't, because
they've got a monolithic structure of morality, which means they don't have to think.
Exactly. And I mean, and I would think that a little bit of critical thinking skills that says that, yay, here's the thing. If we have, like, if we just look at homeless people, right? And I'm just bringing this up because like I try to find housing for people a lot and I fail. And a lot of times it's because of the availability of affordable housing or housing for people who may be suffering from mental illness, from if they were incarcerated previously and they're not able to rent, or there's a lot of different things that happen, but oftentimes those particular things are able to persist because of policies. You know what I'm saying? And so it would make sense to me saying that, hey, we need to actually engage people at the higher up level in order for us to be able to combat this problem. If I don't even think Chicago alone. Chicago is constantly building, however, we have a very large homeless population. Why is that? You know what I'm saying? In actuality, we can house everybody, but again, people all want to get paid.
Right.
So again, we have to look at, all these different things about us suffering and all this other stuff and say, and then people like, oh, this is a prophecy saying that, Jesus is coming back. Well, here's the thing. How many doomsday arguments have been going on since the beginning of time? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, was it when 2012, when all those people was like praying, and then, all of a sudden, like I forgot which church it was, where, they were saying that was the end of the world. You know what I'm saying? And then midnight came on 2013 and they were still there. And it was like, goddamn. You know what I'm saying? So again, away with that. If you want to really address suffering for real, then you're going to look at the different systems behind you in order for those to change. And we can do that as constituents, not sitting up here saying that that's prophecy, the end of the world. Fuck out of here.
Well,
Sorry.
see, and that's the thing is people want to, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying I'm adverse to prayer. I'm not telling anyone they shouldn't pray. But what drives me nuts is people similar to that person who will say, writing Congress doesn't do anything. Going out doesn't do anything. You need to pray. Give me a break. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Until you demonstrate prayer works, it doesn't do anything.
And
Get your hands out there. And the fact that he makes comments like we're not doing anything, that literally frustrates me because I donate my time regularly. I have given away so many things to try and help people. I host Toys for Tots benefits every year. And I'm not saying that to brag. It just pisses me off when someone assumes we're not doing anything. Like, dude, get out of here, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're very sorry.
Yeah.
I have another stream to go on.
Oh, yeah. No.
Okay.
We got to talk about
I'm
for
so
5 minutes.
sorry.
I'm gonna if I might complete that. First off, the thing that you said about look around you and stuff like that, those are both arguments from design and from nature, and they're both logical fallacies. Secondly, Jessica in the Facebook chat, if you would like to have a conversation, because I've seen the questions you've been having, you can get at us on Twitter. Just DM us on Twitter. Also, Cynthia, thanks for what you do. But
plug yourself, please, wherever we can find you.
Well, no, Cynthia, you're right. And also, let's be subjective about our suffering. Is suffering today different than it was in the first century? Obviously, yes. Well, no, in the way that we suffer, right?
Right. In
we
the way
have
that
access
we suffer,
to clean water and food. Yeah, we have access to these things. Let's talk about how they meant suffering in the first universe or the first. Sure. So yeah, I thought those are all. And Dean, yeah, your ontological nonsense is nonsense.
All right. Before you go, real quick, could you tell everyone where they can find you?
So we're on YouTube, Divine Disbelief. We are on people's after shows and stuff on a fairly regular basis. You can find us on Twitter. We're at Divine Disbelief. I am at Motel Cowboy.
We'll be on Atheist Pastor's channel tomorrow morning at 4:30 Pacific.
4:30 in the morning.
He's in Australia though, and then
he's in Australia.
She's going to be on In Time here as soon as you get done with
a few minutes,
this.
but I don't have my watch on.
Got a Spartan Theology on Monday.
Yeah,
and then something else. We also do our shows every Wednesday. We missed last night. We do our shows every Wednesday night at 5:30 Pacific.
Yeah, 5:30 Pacific, 7:30 Central.
Still becoming accustomed to the time change.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to it. I still work for a company that's based in Texas, so I'm like, I'm 2 hours behind everybody, and I always forget about that.
Yeah, mine is too. But thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was nice to meet you.
Thank y'all for hanging out. Y'all are wonderful, and I hope to talk to y'all again sometime soon.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
All right, Jez, I'd like you to address this if you could. Do all atheists believe something came from nothing? And why do we call earth, earth, land, land, water, water?
Well, they seem to be two quite disconnected questions to me. To take the first one, do all atheists believe something came from? I can't speak for anybody apart from me, and I tend to believe what I would read with someone like Lawrence Krauss, because he's more qualified than me.
Yes.
I don't go around making my own mind up about how I think things came to be. I think, well, okay, and to be honest with you, I've not read Lawrence Krauss's book. I've got other things to read. I read many things, but I have not yet got around to reading that latest book of his, which I'm looking forward to. But in the meantime, I have that opinion. And I do know that Lawrence, when he refers to nothing, he doesn't mean nothing in the sense that the average person tries to imagine nothing.
Right.
You literally
Exactly.
cannot imagine nothing at the level at which physicists like Lawrence Krauss are talking about nothing. You've got to just stop going there. The best thing you can do is start reading books like Flatland. Have you heard of Flatland?
I have not.
It's a 19th century book. It's a model of Plato's cave theory, talking essentially about beings who live on a completely flat plane. The beings themselves are flat. The plane is flat. And then one day it's revealed to them they've got height. And it's to do with you can't imagine what you cannot see and experience. So we cannot imagine what this nothing is, which physicists might refer to. And that's fine. We're allowed to say that.
Right.
Yes, I do consider that to be a fact, but I can't go further than that. Earth, land, and water. Well, why do Russians call water voda? I mean, it's an ancient sound. It's an ancient word. I mean, you take water in England. You've got rivers like the Usk and the Esk and all that. It's all similar roots of language. It's a completely different etymological question.
Right.
And most European languages come from a form of Proto-Lithuanian, which itself comes from a form of Sanskrit going back several thousands of years. So you want to go into that? Fine, be my guest, but I'm not my area. I teach maths. So I can't tell you why Earth is called Earth. But by all means, go online and Google the etymology of those words, and you'll find it really interesting. Where words like earth and land and water come from, and why so many countries have these ancient sounds in common, because language is ancient.
Right.
And we all come from earlier languages. We all speak root languages.
Awesome. So I am going to have to sign off in a moment because I have another show, but I'd like to give everyone a quick, keep it under 2 minutes, closing or anything you would like to say. Sorry to put everyone on the spot, but I will have to jet. So Cynthia, under 2 minutes, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience?
I would like to say to the audience, question everything.
Yes.
Don't take anything at face value. You know, and that doesn't have anything to do with what you believe. And to be honest with you, if you do have a belief in a god or gods or however you like to call that, then your god or gods should be able to stand up to scrutiny.
I agree. Jez.
Exactly that. Just looking at Jessica's recent question there, who created language? Well, there's two competing theories that I'm aware of. One would be that actually men having to control wolves that voluntarily came to work with humans 50, 80,000 years ago is one theory. Another theory is that women did it by talking to each other while the men were off doing other things, again, in prehistory. So stop thinking that you've got a question which somehow unlocks the secret of ignorance, which is what you're trying to do. Unlocking the secret of ignorance. There is no who created language. There is no who. Things evolve. Things change from ancient ideas. Just stop chasing ignorance. Stop chasing ignorance, the audience, please, all of you. Just chase answers.
And before we get to Cindy, to answer your question, KCA Randy, no, I believe currently, except for Divine Disbelief, I'm the only one with a YouTube channel. But
I've got some, but you wouldn't want them. I teach maths and kettlebells and things. You wouldn't be interested.
I do. I was going to say I do write a blog, and it does have my social media handles on it too. I write a blog at adoshealthandwellness.com. So if any people want to go to that website and then kind of connect with me, feel free.
All right. Cindy.
Well, everything that has been said before, and also because that's my area, learn to think critically, because you can learn it. It's not innate. You have to learn it, and I learned it in the last 10 years. So anyone can learn it.
Absolutely, Kenneth.
It's so funny Cynthia was saying the thing. I actually have question everything in Latin tattooed One of my many tattoos, but probably my mother's least favorite one. So there was a quote that I think I'd like to actually just read because it's better than anything I would come up with on my own. But it had a profound effect on me. And it's something that Christopher Hitchens said when he was speaking at a university. He said, "I want to live my life taking the risk all the time that I don't know anything like enough yet, that I haven't understood enough, that I can't know enough, that I'm always hungrily operating on the margins of a potentially great harvest of future knowledge and wisdom. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'd urge you to look at those who tell you, those people who tell you at your age that you are dead until you believe as they do. What a terrible thing to be telling children. And that you can only live by accepting an absolute authority. Don't think of that as a gift. Think of it as a poisoned chalice. Push it aside, however tempting it is. Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way."
Thanks.
I love that quote. I love
I
that.
think that's
Cindy,
it.
right before we sign off, could you just in 30 seconds, could you address this? But it has to start somewhere because people do say that regularly.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
That's
It doesn't
right.
have to.
Yeah.
Why do you say it has to?
Where are you getting this from?
Can I to say this real quick? Jessica, look up on YouTube Lawrence Krauss, Something from Nothing. He does a very, very excellent lecture, and he uses science and physics to actually break that entire you dig down. It's excellent. Take a look at it.
Awesome. Well, okay, I do have to sign off. I've got another stream starting in 5 minutes, but I seriously can't thank you all enough. You know, I know this was originally a one-off,
Thank
but
you.
this would be cool to do this again, the entire
Yeah.
roundtable. So,
Yes.
Yeah, let's
Cynthia,
do it.
thanks for joining us from Chicago, Illinois. Jez,
Thank you.
thanks for joining us from the UK. It was a pleasure meeting you for the first
Pleasure
time.
meeting you all, guys. Yeah.
Cindy, thanks for joining us from Belgium. Again,
Thank you
always
all.
a pleasure.
Hmm?
Kenneth, again, Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
Hopefully we have more debates lined up for you.
I
And
hope so.
everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe and have a lovely day, everyone. Thanks again.